Okay.
Off we go.
All right.
So, good afternoon.
Hi.
To start off with, would you like to just say your name and where you are?
Yep. My name is Deb Schneider-Murphy, and I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
So the first big question is, who are you, Deb Schneider-Murphy, as a human being, as a person? And that can be your qualities, your values, your passions, whatever you'd like.
Wow. That's a big question to start with. There's so many ways to answer that too. I'm a mother of 2 adult sons. I'm a wife. I'm a friend of a lot of different kind of people. I'm curious. I'm a lifetime learner. I'm an artist, but not in the conventional sense of that. I love to move. I love to have access to people's stories, and I love to be partner to people's growth journeys. I love animals. I've been partnering with horses to do psychotherapy, and that's really exciting. I really love what is breaking, what is novel, what is emerging in the field of Gestalt therapy too, but humanism. And what's been really intriguing me lately is the racial issues and how those are emerging, surfacing.
Okay. So I'm also interested to know what comes to mind as an event or a set of circumstances in your life that you would say have really influenced or impacted who you are.
Mm-hmm. Events? Am I allowed to talk about?
Yeah, events,
Oh, well, I think
circumstances.
you know, I would say that I understand that a lot of what I have struggled with preceded my lifetime. That there are traumas in my lineage that affected how people related to each other, and that was largely how people related to each other, the relational patterns that have to do with trauma that kind of set the stage for difficulties that I had early on. So, for example, I know from my parents, I know from my mom that my birth was pretty traumatic. And because it was so traumatic, and because she didn't have the support that new moms need, she got pretty depressed. And so there were complications really early for me that I think affected my resilience and the way that I trusted or didn't trust. So I would say that I know has been pretty pretty fundamental to the struggles that I've had, but it's been really, really difficult to get to that because I didn't grow up in a family where there was a lot of violence. I didn't grow up in a family where there was where there was a lot of severe neglect. I have patterns similar to people who I know have had a lot more severe, direct, identifiable trauma.
I'm curious. Yeah, here, I'll pause for a sec if you want to
Okay.
close a blind. So what I'm interested in with what you were just saying is also, could you maybe identify some of those, like contextualize some of those transgenerational issues that you were talking about? Like what kind of context did your family come from? Sorry.
Okay. I'll give you an example. In my mother's family, there was a murder-suicide, and so my grandfather's brother murdered his girlfriend and then committed suicide. And my mother didn't know that story growing up. She just knew that she wasn't supposed to go in this particular grocery store, which happened to be owned by the family that whose daughter was killed. But this was a small town in Ohio, and there was a phenomenal amount of shame around those events. And my grandfather, so this was his older brother. My grandfather was going to go to college to be a minister, and his father died. He had to come back and take care of the farm. So my grandfather was a farmer. He raised a family of 5 kids. None of these kids knew this family history. They just knew that they were never to go into town unless they were properly dressed. The expectations that these kids had to be exemplary in the community were really, really high. My grandmother married into this family. The people of the town were saying, "Oh, you're marrying that murderer's brother." So there was all this dynamic, trying to look good, trying to be perfect. My grandmother went way overboard in being involved in the church and inviting people of the town to come out, especially during Christmas time. You know, they really bent over backwards to, I think, clear the family name. But my mom didn't know about that until she was an adult.
Okay.
And I would say that the high expectations, the issues around shame, the not talking about things that were important, having a whole bunch of shit around not expressing feelings.
Yeah.
Those were part of the dynamics that characterized my family too.
Wow. Okay. Another thing that I'm curious about is in the course of your life, can you identify a person or maybe a couple people who you would say have really influenced who you are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking just this afternoon, I was thinking about Barbara Crane. Barbara was the mother of a really good friend of mine in high school. She was getting her master's degree in social work when I was in high school. So she was being a college student after having 4 kids, and that was pretty inspirational. But she was also studying Gestalt therapy. And so as a teenager, she was like a second mom to me. As a teenager, I was getting doses. I was getting exposure. I was getting, flavors, tastes of what that work was about. So she's one person.
Mm-hmm. And how did that influence you?
Um, I know that I was interested both in body and psyche as early as high school. I mean, it took me a long time to kind of get to took me a long time to find my way, I guess. But she helped lay the ground for me. She knew how to connect with me in a way that my parents had no clue about. So she was influential in terms of teaching me possibilities and being present. And I was really depressed at that time, and I felt safe. I felt included. I felt cared about. So she's one person that I would say is influential. Another person that was really influential to me was my 8th grade teacher, my English teacher, Gary Smith. And when I was in 8th grade, there were no girls track team. There was not a girls track team because that was before Title IX. And the boys track coach was seeing me and a couple other girls running faster and lapping some of the other girls. So they asked us if we wanted to come out and practice with the boys team, which we did. And so what they would do is they'd send the boys out on wind sprints. So they'd send the fastest group out, and then the next fastest group, and the next fastest group. And after the boys had run maybe 2 or 3 wind sprints, then they'd put us in fresh with the boys that had already run. And it was, it was supposed to be, I think, incentive for the boys to run faster. But it was really hard for us as girls because we were being put in competition with the boys. And they were the most popular boys in the school. They didn't like us being there, and they made a lot of fun of us. And I was really sensitive to teasing. So, of course, they would tease. And one day in science class, they started in and kind of shrunk away, which was my way of defending myself, my way of staying safe. And I was just on the edge of tears most of class. And then I went to English class and somebody started in again, teasing. But my English teacher, Gary Smith, happened to be the assistant track coach. So he stopped class. He walked me up to the front of the school and sat me down and let me cry. And basically told me it was okay to be a girl and be fast. It was okay to be a girl and be strong. And the relationship that I had with him, both in English class, because I happen to love literature and poetry, and because he was there in that way at a time that nobody else was. He was really influential as well. But because he was supportive, because he was young, and he was great with kids. He loved literature. Feelings mattered. Feelings always mattered to him. And being strong.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting how some teachers really do manage to transcend with their students.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder where you went from that, actually, because the next question is about how you experience yourself as a woman or within your gender.
That's hard. I think I wished in the beginning of my realization of my gender, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy being a girl. Um, maybe I get some of that from my mom. She was always happier being out in the fields with the guys than being in the kitchen with women. And even though she is definitely a female kind of woman, you know, she's not a butchy kind of woman. She's always loved being in nature. She's always loved being outdoors. She's always loved being active. Um, and I don't blame her, actually. I'd rather spend time outside. So being a little tomboyish, I would say that I was a little more on the tomboyish end of things, of being in track and playing field hockey later, loving to be outside, being with the horses. Um, and I don't think that I felt powerful in being female. I didn't see my mom being in her strength with my dad. Even though I saw her mother was kind of, she stepped out as a woman, my grandmother. She was the first one to bob her hair in the 1920s. She taught school when she was just 17. And in those days, they didn't allow people to teach, like women to teach, if they were pregnant or had families. So she stopped teaching, but I think in some ways she always was, you know, she was always teaching something. But anyway, I don't know. I don't think that I had models of women who were self-possessed, women who loved being women, women who were free in expressing their sexuality. Women who knew how to be empowered without without I would say what I saw was women who abused their power sometimes too, just in shaming ways.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. So I like being a woman now. I don't exactly know how that happened.
Have you sort of found your own way into your own kind of power?
I think I keep doing that. I think I keep doing it. I mean, I've been kind of quiet and retiring a good bit of my life and finding my voice. I think finding my voice has been difficult, but I'm also understanding that there are lots of ways to express that don't necessarily require words. And that's helpful.
Okay. Well, changing track a little bit, I would like to ask you how you came into Gestalt, which is sort of the meeting point for this interview. How did you get into this Gestalt world?
Well, it was Barbara Crane. So I think I had exposure when I was a teenager, even though I didn't know I was having exposure. And then in my 20s, I was extremely depressed. Barbara was the one who gave me the name of a psychotherapist, and he happened to be a Gestalt therapist. I worked with him for maybe 6 months before he left town and moved away. And And then there was another therapist that I worked with for several years who was also a Gestalt therapist. And I think most of the people that I've worked with in my own growth journey have been Gestalt folks. So my exposure was, I think, with a second therapist. He was also a teacher trainer.
Mhm.
And when I was kind of wandering around without a rudder, he suggested that I go back to graduate school, which is something that I hadn't considered. And I got my master's degree in social work. Concurrent to that, I was being trained in Gestalt, and then I found that the work, the training that I did in Gestalt therapy had such an incredible impact on me. The classes in my school were not anywhere near as impactful or lively or dynamic, deep.
But the school gave you the paper, right?
Right. The school gave me the paper.
Mhm.
Gestalt training gave me depth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how would you say that Gestalt has affected you as a person?
Well, that's also complicated. To answer that is also a little complicated because I think Gestalt, as I experienced it as a client early on, was very confrontive. And what that did to me, as somebody who had pretty early trauma and relational um, misattunement really early on, the confrontation drove me more into shutdown. And I remember the words, look at me, respond, look at me, respond. And that went on probably for about the first 9 months that I was in therapy. What it was doing is really teaching me to go beyond my threshold in order to speak. And it was really re-traumatizing. Now I know, looking back. And there were things that went on that I know now were borderline abusive. So even though I learned a lot about the theory, what I was learning about the practice as, being on the client end of things was very confusing. So I left. I think I was practicing with children, doing Gestalt therapy with kids, and I had some wonderful, wonderful exposure to other Gestalt therapists in the time that I was in training, and then after as well. So Violet Oaklander was one of the people that I was very privileged to train with. I met Ruella Frank through the Gestalt Institute, where I was doing my training, who later has been very influential to me. But I left the field of psychotherapy altogether. I decided that if that's what it meant to be a psychotherapist, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be that way with people. And in being able to do play therapy with kids, it was a very different kind of way of doing Gestalt therapy. It wasn't confrontive. It wasn't up in your face. And I had an idea that that's what Gestalt therapy was about. So I left the professional together. I schooled in massage therapy and trained in craniosacral therapy. And it was only in 2000, I guess, when I met Ruella, that I saw a way of integrating the psychotherapy and the foundational philosophy and the theory of the work into a practice that made sense to my body, to my being. And because I had been interested in learning more about the body, I had learned a lot about connecting with people through my hands. It felt like a good match. So it wasn't really until toward training with Ruella in 2006, I kind of went from defining defining my work as being body work, and then working with Ruella helped to shift my sense of who I am and what my work is in the world back to doing psychotherapy. But this time it was more with a focus on the body, much more relational, much more respectful, much more humanizing.
Okay. Sounds like an interesting voyage through.
It's been a little unusual.
Yeah.
My journey has been a little unusual.
Well, I'm wondering then, do you feel at this point like you're part of a Gestalt community? That's a phrase that we hear a lot, and I wonder if it means anything to you.
Oh, it does. I did not feel like I was part of a Gestalt community early on. And I think the person who trained was my primary trainer. I think had that as a goal of developing community. But because of the difficulties and personality difficulties, I think that didn't happen. And I think it wasn't until I was training with Ruella and had an opportunity to train with people that were not from the US. Our training group was 17, and I think 7 of us were from the US. So having the direct experience of having people from around the world interested in the same thing that I was interested in and partnering to learn together was the first big step back into that. I went to my first AAGT meeting, I think just 2 years ago, and I had that experience again. It was like, wow, there are people that I have a lot in common with that I would never have guessed I would connect with. And I think it's because the philosophy is similar, practice is similar. A base for understanding, I think, that makes it easy that way.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know you've been talking about some of these, but I wonder if you identify them maybe more precisely, or if a particular moment comes to mind about what you would say one of your most challenging moments around Gestalt have been. I mean, that can be as a client, as a therapist, as a student, as anything.
Challenging moments?
Around Gestalt.
I think challenging moments would have been having been shamed in a therapy group and not having repair from that, having exactly the opposite experience in a different training group that was also Gestalt, where there was misattunement, there was rupture, and there was repair. And there was checking back, and there was more repair. So I think those are two examples. I don't know what else. You could ask me the question again. I'll probably come up with something else.
I mean, that's fine, but it was just about what some of your challenges around or within Gestalt have been. As a
I think
leaving
was pivotal for me. I think it was important. In retrospect, I think it was important for me to leave. It was important because of what I learned when I was away. And then it was even more important to come back and be welcomed and find a place and find ways to connect again with what I learned when I was away.
That sounds interesting, though, the rupture and repair kind of theme.
But I think given my background and given how much rupture there was without repair growing up, how much how much shame I carried with me, how much shame there was in my whole family, I think it was kind of natural for me to want to replay that and work it out.
Yeah, and that's important. It sounds very significant.
Yeah, it has been.
Huh. And the challenges sort of like loop back to the positive part as well. But I'm wondering what you would say one of your greatest or one of your most fulfilling kind of moments would be. And you can answer that either within Gestalt or as a person, however you like.
There are three things that come to mind right away. The most fulfilling. One is the work that I've done with Ruella. One is going through training with Veronica Locke, who's doing equine facilitated psychotherapy. And she's doing that from a humanistic, existential, phenomenological frame. And that really brought me back to my roots. And I would say also that the Gestalt online training that you and David have done has also brought me a sense of possibility and kind of like reinforced the commitment, or reinforced my love of the work in knowing that I can do it online. And with Veronica is like knowing that I could do Gestalt work with horses, partnering with horses and working with people. And Ruella, it's been, I can go from this philosophy, from this theory base, and do a session with almost no words. So it's learning different ways.
Yeah. Sort of integrating. Oh, I can do this and this. I can do that. Yeah. And look what else I can do. That's
right.
Sounds like a lovely process to discover.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah. So being able to apply Ruella's, the developmental somatic psychotherapy, being able to apply that in this virtual frame has been exciting for so many reasons. It's allowing me to feel comfortable in front of a camera. It's allowing me to feel more comfortable being seen. And especially if this is going to be, on accessible, I'm really putting myself out in a way that I never have. And that seems important too, given how hidden I was, given how how my past was marked with retreating and pulling in and being as small and quiet and muted as possible. So I think there's a little diva. It's one of the expression.
But it's interesting. I mean, the project for me is also, it's about learning how to take some space, and it's unusual. This is never something that I would have imagined myself doing either. But it seemed like a good idea at the time, and here we are. But I appreciate that, and I appreciate you doing this. And the next question is actually, what's next? What are you going to be doing next? Since you're out here, you know, where do you think you will be going within Gestalt or as a person? And where do you think Gestalt could be going?
The more relationally oriented the work becomes, the dearer it becomes to my heart. I did some training in somatic experiencing, and had I not had my Gestalt background, I think I would never have had a way of working with trauma in the nuanced way that I can do now. And I like that they're compatible ways of working. I have found them to be compatible. And I'm really excited when I find Gestalt therapists who have also done other things and have integrated them in. I lost track a little bit of my thread there.
I'm just wondering where you're going now that you're integrating.
Where am I going? Well, I'm at an age that a lot of my peers are retiring. And I feel as if in a lot of ways, I'm kind of hitting peak. And that's a very weird thing to experience. My husband's retired now. Right, I am. I'm definitely a late bloomer. So my husband's retired, and we just bought an RV, and just this last weekend, just today, we got back from our second weekend out. And yesterday I had my first 2 psychotherapy sessions from my RV.
That's so exciting.
So it's what that's opening up are the possibilities that I could continue doing my work on the road and have the woods as my background instead of the wall behind me. And I have no idea where that might go. I just know that it's been a little idea in my mind. I've got all kinds of ethics kind of things and logistics kind of things and technological kind of things that are wonky, are not finished. They're not worked out. They're not smooth. Yeah.
But it does sound like there's a definite kind of plan for your next moves.
Yeah. And I'd really like with COVID. With COVID, it's been really difficult for me to continue the work that I was doing, partnering with horses. And I'd like to find a way back there. I don't know if it's assisting classes or if it's traveling in my RV and visiting some of the people that I've trained with. If it's doing interviews like you're doing, I don't know. I'd love to interview you now that you've interviewed me.
Thank you. Well,
So
it sounds
I don't
interesting.
know. I'd like to do a little writing, but
Hmm.
I have great big ideas, and a lot of times I don't.
They don't
I
always
don't
come out.
know. I don't know. I don't always manifest my great ideas.
Oh, that's okay. I don't think most of us do, actually. So do you have any thoughts about where Gestalt might be going in the future?
Hmm.
Or were you just going to let it find its own way?
No, well, if the people that I'm meeting in the field are any indication, I've just met some absolutely wonderful people through the Gestalt connections that I've made, and that keeps happening. It's happening too much for it to be a fluke now.
It is. It
Yeah,
really is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
I'm meeting total strangers for these interviews, and I'm like, wow, that was a really incredible person.
mhm. I bet
So
that's fun.
I agree with you.
That's
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
So where do you think it's going with all of these incredible people you're meeting?
Um, I think it's just getting richer. I know that when I was at the AAGT meeting in Toronto, there there were issues that were raised that were very, very hard and heartfelt, but painful, really painful. And the response that I saw to some people talking about how they felt left out, how they felt alienated, or how they felt missed, the response that I saw people take was to listen, was to take time out from the workshops that they'd signed up for. I'm getting teary. Um, and listen. And that seems so incredibly important given what's happening in the world today.
Hmm.
To be able to have skills to be able to listen, not only to have the skills, but to apply the skills and to teach people the skills to relate and to listen with all that we have, with our hearts, with our bodies.
Hmm.
And I don't think the world needs answers.
Hmm.
I think we just need to learn how to listen and be present to one another. So I'm hoping that Gestalt therapy can play a part in the healing the world is needing, people in the world.
Wow, that was very well put.
I'd like to be a part of that. I'd like to continue to be a part of that somehow. I'd like to be a player.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you're in there. I think you're in there.
It's
Okay. Well, thank you. Is
always
there
good to have
anything else?
playmates too.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's so
Yeah,
much fun.
I think
Um,
that's it. I'm just having a lot of fun meeting people and finding ways to play,
mhm.
finding ways to create, finding ways to mhm, to do benevolent mischief in the world.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, play and also enjoyment of some of the deeper work, even if
Hmm.
it's not,
Right.
hee hee ha ha
Oh
fun.
no, not yeah. I mean,
Yeah, the
I
the
have
deep
yeah,
enjoyment.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah, I
a
get that.
broad a broad view of play.
Yeah, you do. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add right now?
Mm, I don't think so.
Okay. Any
I've
part of
enjoyed
yourself
this.
that we've missed?
Well, there's always other parts.
Yeah. Have to keep some mystery though, right?
I know, right?
Well,
Yeah,
I was looking forward to speaking with you, and I'm
I
very
was,
glad that we did. And
yeah,
I appreciate this, and I really appreciate getting to know you. So if it's
yeah,
okay with you, we will leave it here and just say thank
sure.
you.
All right. Thank you, Heather. I've really enjoyed being interviewed. I've enjoyed talking with you. I'm looking forward to interviewing you back.
Okay, thanks.